How's it going, everybody? Hope we're all doing alright today. Back with another brand new video, and today we're out on the Grain Road, which is just outside of Blackburn, and I absolutely love it here. It's a place I've been wild camping before, many times, back in those woodlands there, and up on this hill. Yeah, and I just get really great energy from this place. You know, you do get a lot of walkers up here, but it's so barren, and it's not remote, but it's, you know, just over that hills where I live. But I don't know, you just get feelings from this place. There's a lot of strange goings on. So yeah, today's video, obviously the theme of being by water, we're going to be talking about the Loch Ness Monster, which is something that we were going to do inevitably at some point, and we're going to explore the famous surgeon's photo. And those that are into the cryptozoology will know what that is, so if you would like to find out more, please stick around. So then, Nessie, the Loch Ness Monster. Now obviously, I'm very passionate about, you know, wild men, Bigfoots, that type of mythology. That's really my wheelhouse. But you could definitely argue the case that the Loch Ness Monster is the most iconic cryptid in the world and of all time. I think that's a fair argument that you can make right there. The legend of the Loch Ness Monster dates all the way back to 560 AD, when Saint Columba, who was a Christian minister, he was by the loch, and one of his parishioners was attacked and dragged into the loch by some kind of beast, and he banished it. He showed it the sign of the cross, and it fled back into the loch. Look at that for a backdrop. That is absolutely gorgeous. So then, the surgeon's photo. Again, like I was saying, you know, people that are into cryptozoology, they will know what this is, I'm sure. It's arguably one of the most iconic photographs of the last 100 years, and it depicts the alleged Loch Ness Monster, which is the famous lake monster from Loch Ness, hence why we're by water for today's video. But yeah, like I was saying, the history of the Loch Ness Monster, it dates back to 500 AD, and it really started to grow a life of its own back in the 1930s. That's when a lot of stories and sightings were starting to come out of the loch. And you know, one of the big naysayer arguments that we've spoken about this before many times is that, you know, there's no animals left to discover on this planet. You know, how could it hide there for so long without being detected by humans? And it's a good question to ask, is that. So for every good question, there's always a good answer, and there should be. And in regards to finding animals that we hadn't previously discovered, especially those that are considered to already be extinct, the best example of that was in the 1930s, funnily enough, when the previously thought extinct fish, the coelacanth, was rediscovered on the coast of South Africa. Now, this was an animal that had thought to have been extinct for tens of millions of years, dating back to the Jurassic era, and there was plenty of evidence for it in the fossil record, and it was rediscovered again, just like that. And then, you know, going back to the 1800s, people came back from Africa with stories of gigantic black herd covered savages, you know, and science would refute those claims because, of course, at that point in time, our society was still very, not anti-Darwinism, but a large portion of society believed that, you know, we came from the Garden of Eden as opposed to being related to other species of hominids. And of course, all it took was the hunters to bring back a body of a gorilla, and it all changed. And then, you know, further east on the Isle of Komodo, people were coming back with stories of gigantic 10-foot long scale-covered dragons. Again, science did not believe it. And when they finally caught one and brought it back, it all changed. You know, so that's all it takes, that bit of evidence to refute these claims, and it changes the game. So again, evidence there is the key word, and that's certainly what, you know, the surgeon's photo was when it surfaced. It was evidence, or alleged evidence, of a large, you know, unknown prehistoric remnant creature that was hiding up in Loch Ness. And it was, again, when the sightings began to build momentum back in the 30s, the Royal Society of Zoology hired a famous explorer and hunter called Marmaduke Wetherell, and he was sent up to the loch to see if he could find this creature and, if possible, capture it. Now, he didn't find it, you know, but he did come back with some evidence of footprints, of what he believed were footprints of this creature. So when the Zoological Society of London looked at these photographs of these footprints that Marmaduke had brought back, they determined that they weren't, you know, some sort of remnant prehistoric reptile. They were actually hippopotamus footprints, and it was later decided that the hippos had been by the loch because a travelling circus had been there. And obviously back in these days is when there was still large mammalian species like hippo, like elephants, like lions that were used in circuses. So Wetherell was embarrassed, and he, you know, flew from the public view after that. So, being a bit of a practical joker and having a reputation for it, Wetherell decided to create his own photo, and he enlisted the help of a few conspirators, and one of them was a surgeon, and they basically managed to create like a small toy submarine raft and stick on top of it, you know, a monster looking shape type, you know, creature, and they let it float in the loch, and then that's where they got the pictures. Now obviously at this point Wetherell was hiding from public view. He'd gone into sort of seclusion, if you like, and this is where the name Surgeon's Photo comes from, because the man that he gave the photographs to was a surgeon. The idea behind it was that people would take it more seriously if it had come from somebody who was an academic, who had, you know, an actual professional reputation. And the rest, as they say, is history. For 60 years, this photo fooled the world into thinking that there was a plesiosaur type creature hiding within the depths of Loch Ness. Wasn't until the 1990s when, you know, all these people who took part in this elaborate hoax had all passed away that the truth came to light. You know, documents surfaced, legal documentation, and it revealed that it was all one great big practical joke. And that was the end of that. Say goodbye to the surgeon's photo as the most definitive proof of the existence of the Loch Ness Monster. But having said that, it still does beg the question, was there anything ever in Loch Ness to begin with? Because all around the world, there's, you know, thousands of sightings over the last hundreds of years, thousands of years even, in lakes of, you know, monster type creatures. And it's a big part of mythology as well. You know, Greek mythology, Norse mythology, all have their own version of lake serpents and things that live in the ocean. So, you know, there's always got to be a grain of truth in every legend and mythology. So is it possible? Now obviously, I'm not suggesting for 1 second that there is a, you know, a hydra or a kraken hiding in Loch Ness. But Scottish folklore and legend talks about a creature known as the water kelpie, and it's seen all the way throughout Scottish history, you know, and legends in all different lochs, not just Loch Ness. And it's more of a supernatural creature. There was actually a fantastic film that was made many years ago. I was a teenager when it came out, I think, and it was called Waterhouse Legend of the Deep. If you've never seen it, I'd highly recommend it. It's more of a family film, but it's very respectful to the legend. And yeah, the legend of this creature is that once it's, you know, there's only ever one of them at one time, and once it is getting ready to die, it will lay one egg, and it will wash up on shore, or it will end up wherever, you know, in the various network of lochs up in northern Scotland, and it'll hatch, the cycle will begin again. So that's your sort of supernatural argument. But what about a flesh and blood type creature? What if this is an actual physical creature that we're dealing with here? I tell you what, one thing for sure, water, large bodies of water, is a very, very funny thing, and it can play tricks on your eyes. Now, I was by the coast a couple of days ago, and it was a very windy, wet day, and I went down to the front, and the waves were, you know, very, very choppy. But the way that the wind was blowing on the ocean, it was creating these ripples. And, you know, if you're looking out over a massive body of water, like Loch Ness, or even just these reservoirs, and if you saw something like that at a glance, you know, like, you could be fooled quite easily into thinking that a large creature made that. And I think a lot of photographs of, you know, Nessie and other sea creatures from around the world, lake monsters, account for that phenomenon. So yeah, obviously the most famous argument, most iconic explanation of what the Loch Ness Monster is it's some kind of plesiosaur type creature, which is an extinct marine reptile, not a dinosaur. It's a marine reptile that went extinct at the end of the Cretaceous period, and that it's, you know, a small remnant population has managed to survive for all that time. And Loch Ness never used to be a body of water. It was a glacier back in the Ice Age, and then when the ice began to melt 10,000 years ago, it's theorised that maybe a small pod of plesiosaur managed to swim into the loch and get cut off, and they've been there ever since. Look, here's the thing. As someone that is fascinated and very passionate about dinosaurs, the idea that a small population of plesiosaurs managed to survive the Great Extinction 65 million years ago is very romantic, very heroic, very mythical. You know, it captivates us as that kind of stuff. But from what I know about animals, from my studying of them throughout these years, you know, going to uni, it's just not possible. You know, we've talked about population bottleneck before, and that can sustain a population of animals that is 250 minimum. If there were 5 or 6 plesiosaurs that have accounted for all the sightings of the last 100 years in Loch Ness, they'd be dead by now. Or maybe it was just one plesiosaur that was hanging on, and that'd be dead by now. You also have to bear in mind that the plesiosaur was a reptile. Reptiles are cold-blooded animals. They're ectothermic. They rely on external heat sources to keep them warm and to be able to perform basic bodily functions. Well, Loch Ness is a freshwater lake up in northern Scotland. It's freezing. You know, and over time you could argue that maybe an animal like that could have adapted to a colder climate. You know, there's some reptiles that live in colder climates. Certainly we have reptiles here in England. England ain't exactly a warm country. But again, you've got to think about food source as well. It's not a great deal of food in the loch. It's just an animal that is, you know, the dimensions of a plesiosaur. That's potentially, you know, 40 feet in length, a few tons maybe. It's going to need a lot of food every day to survive. And with that, with it being a reptile as well, it needs heat to convert that food into energy, calorific energy. That's how reptiles work. So when you start to sort of break down the argument that this might be a long lost remnant survivor of the dinosaur age, as lovely as that idea is, it just doesn't seem plausible at this point. So what about other potential explanations as to what could explain what people have been seeing all these years? One argument I really like is obviously going back to Marmaduke and his hippopotamus footprints. Obviously back in those days when travelling circuses was still very much a thing, you know, circus, you know, workers, they would take animals like that down to bodies of water to wash themselves. Now, my dad has told me when he was a young lad back in the 60s, they used to, you know, like travelling circuses, they'd take elephants up to the local reservoir in Blackburn and wash them. That, for someone like me that has worked with elephants, been around elephants, that just blags my head. It really, really does. You know, so maybe an elephant swimming in deep water with just its head and the trunk above the surface, it's got that classic, you know, dome-shaped back and swan-like neck archetype that we think of when we're talking about lake monsters. I think that's a great explanation personally. And then another one, so it could be just something as simple as driftwood. And again, like I was saying before, water, and with its movements, it can play very funny tricks on your eyes at a glance. You know, so it could be driftwood. People could have been seeing small boats, and also boats will leave a trail of water behind them. And there's been a lot of pictures captured, allegedly, of the Loch Ness Monster over the years that are just boat trails. So yeah, for me personally, the case was kind of closed last year. I think it was last year, it might have been the year before, and some marine biologists had been up to Loch Ness to do an ecological survey, and they were using a cutting edge technique to sort of sample DNA samples of creatures that were living in the loch. And the main group of trace DNA that came back in the results was eel DNA. Now, you know, again, I'm not suggesting that the Loch Ness Monster or other lake monsters are just eels, but if there was some sort of mega gigantic eel that, you know, pops up once every 2 generations in the wild eel family population that lives in the loch, and that accounts for what people have seen over all these years, you know, and I'd be pretty happy with that. I think that's pretty cool in itself. You know, that there's some sort of 10-12 foot tall, you know, long eel swimming around in Loch Ness. I think that's pretty cool personally. I think ultimately what Loch Ness teaches us about us as a species, as, you know, external thinkers compared to other species of animal around the world, is it's our great desire to believe in the unknown and our fascination with the unknown. Because if you look at Loch Ness, you know, it's a massive, massive body of fresh water. It's miles in length, and you know, it's surrounded by dark, gloomy hills of moorland, kind of like where I am today. You know, and that's when our imagination starts to run wild with the fascination of the unknown. Because as much as we're afraid of the unknown, we're also drawn to it. And I think that is really the main taking of what you can get from this legend. It's just our great desire to believe in something. And maybe that's why, you know, Marmaduke and his fellow conspirators created the Surgeon's Photo in the first place. Maybe that was their ultimate motive. Who knows? Right, well, I'm going to wrap it up there for today, guys. You know, this video has not been a bashing of the Loch Ness Monster. I think it's an amazing legend, and I do truly believe in my heart of hearts that there are undiscovered marine creatures we don't know about. It's a well-known fact that we know more about space than we do about our oceans. And there's, you know, only an estimated 8% of marine creatures that have been discovered worldwide. What's going to account for the other 92%? There's no way we'll ever truly know. That will never be truly answered. It's because the depth of the ocean, it's too much for us to comprehend. So I'm a great believer that there could be some remnant prehistoric creatures that have survived deep down. It happened with the coelacanth, like I was saying before. It has happened before, and it's likely going to happen again as our species further pushes animals into further states of great deforestation. We're going to come into contact with more animals that we don't know about. The giant squid, that was another example. You know, that for, again, I was talking about legends of the Kraken. People were obviously always seeing massive giant squids, and then it was discovered, it was caught on camera, you know, and they have a specimen of one, I believe, in the Natural History Museum. So it can happen. So yeah, anyway, like I say, I'm going to leave it there now. Stop me rambling on. Been great to be out today. Like I say, I absolutely love this spot, and I'm going to go do some more exploring now. And yeah, if you've made it through to the end of the video, please leave a like. If you want to comment on what your thoughts are on what the Loch Ness Monster is, please do. I'd love to know. And yeah, hopefully going to make a couple more videos this week, and I'll see you all further on down the road. Bye bye.